First and foremost, it's about human connection. And before you get to even a state of asking around mentorship, because from human connection comes, hey, can I ask you a question? Comes, hey, you want to grab lunch sometime? Then it becomes a lasting relationship. I've been very fortunate enough to build friendships for a lifetime through this industry. And that wasn't necessarily sort of mentorship seeking. That was simply, hey, we're all traveling on this crazy schedule and we're all drinking the same crappy conference coffee. And it becomes a bonding sort of thing. Local meetups have that same opportunity.
Hey everyone, on this episode of the Identity Heroes, Jerry and I hosted Ian Glazer. Ian shared some stories about how in identity, we may have a lot of the plumbing and tools that we need, but there's something out there right now that's pushing us so much faster that we need to really solve those tough challenges. Ian also talked about how human identity actually is at its core and how it's really one of the most welcoming communities out there. If you want to hear how to get involved, let's go ahead and listen to what Ian has to say. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Identity Heroes. My co-host today, Jerry Gable, and I are joined by someone who needs no introduction, Ian Glazer. Ian, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Your post on LinkedIn just a few days ago really prompted this. Your retrospective of 25 years in the industry, and if not more, to be honest, and you've done it all, touched it all, been everywhere. And like we were just talking about the anecdotal stories, we'd love to use this episode of the Identity Heroes to really dig into some of those stories a bit more. There was only so much you could do in 800 characters on LinkedIn post, and maybe
Also
tease
in
out.
public, but yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well here's the plan. So Jerry, you and I take folks down the path of like that hero's journey, right? The origin, the challenges, the gauntlets, and then the team effort and path forward. As we get started this morning, any thoughts about your history with Ian?
Oh no, we're going to explore some of the dark corners and hopefully come up with some funny anecdotes that happened along the way, of which there are many, many, many. Probably too many to cover in this session, but we'll tease out a few, I'm sure.
Love it. Well, Ian, if I may, so what I did was I actually took down the titles from LinkedIn of all the different roles you've held.
Okay.
I know. And actually, I was flipping the pages.
That's a couple of minutes of
So
utter boredom for the listener.
I took a couple liberties and smushed a couple together because the structure here is one of, we really like to figure out the origin stories. Like, how'd you get to where you are, point B today, from point A where you started? And sometimes looking at folks, the titles and roles and positions they've held over that time becomes a fairly obvious one, and other times it's a zigzag all over.
Which one am I, curiously?
Maybe we'll leave it to the audience. If I may, I'm going to read these real fast. We'll see where we are. So I know that you started off and you were studying artificial intelligence, and you have a comp sci degree as well. And I mean, very prescient knowing where we are today with AI and agentic, but nevertheless started that path and went to becoming a network admin, made a natural transition. And actually, a lot of this you've summarized in your 25 years. So I don't want to be too repetitive. I'm just going over the titles. You were a senior sales consultant and architect. You were a senior sales engineer. You were a senior product manager. You were a senior director of product management, feeling very vendor and.
Apparently, I was very old when I was young. As long as
All right. Then you made that illustrious leap to becoming a senior analyst, and then you had a title of a research VP. You went back client side and vendor side with SVP of Identity Product Management. You have so many board seats that I'm just going to call board member. There's a lot, but you did found something really important along the way, being IdPro and a group that we can hopefully dig into a little bit here as well. You've created your own company since then. You're on the IN's faculty. And last but not least, you are now at Signal as the Chief Customer and Strategy Officer. I made you feel old when you were young. This is 25 years of amazing stuff. Like, what do you think? This feels pretty linear to me. Like, you knew where this was going. Like,
no.
First, take me a different way.
I don't believe in I have a career. Like, a career is the narrative you say, looking back at what you've done and be like, all right, how the hell am I going to explain this to a recruiter? Right? Like, because none of it is actually sensible. So no, things just happened. Right. And for a long time, very long time, in fact, I had the opportunity and was fortunate enough to work with friends and for friends and leave places with friends to go with other friends. It was very rare in the things I've done in the past that I worked with strangers. And in some regards, it was great because they could, my buddies could cover for me. And, because not actually being great at what I do, it was always handy to have people that are like, yeah, okay, we'll show you the ropes. I don't know. It was really about following interesting work and following interesting people. I don't think there's
Okay.
anything more complicated than that.
Okay. I mean, and
Well,
I jumped to the conclusion of it being linear. I mean, I think you even said in your post about it being young and impatient and brash and following just that direction, just going where things led you without having a lot of foresight into where it was taking. But it sounds like working with friends and really smart people, surrounding yourself with people you could learn from was a path.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, present company notwithstanding or withstanding, I don't know Jerry, what's the appropriate phrase here. So for those playing at home, Jerry was my boss when I was at Burton Group. And that was I had been enamored with Burton Group and with analysts and the work they were doing in identity, especially, and thought that seems like a great job. And there was a while when like I really wanted that job a lot, but there was always bad timing because I wanted to go work on Jerry's team, Jerry and Bob Blakely, and like I wanted to be on that team. And there, like just no headcount. Then there was headcount, but then I had got a gig I liked and what have you. And then at some point, at least in my memory, Lori Robinson calls me and says, "Look, you really need to talk to Jerry. We have headcount. Like you got to come on board." I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm really liking my gig." She's like, "Okay, but talk to him." I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna do that." And then Bob Blakely calls me up and basically says, "Look, I don't care whether it's this July or next, but you're coming on board, and otherwise I will put any startup you go to out of business." Very direct,
there,
slightly sort of, I don't know, Goomba-esque, like, you were coming on board, like it or not, get in the boat. Um, but that's how I became a Burton analyst. There was a precursor story to that. But my first report was on access certification. It's probably still in circulation. Shutter. Um, and I got it done reasonably early in the cycle. And I turned it in, and Bob Blakely was the research. What was the actual title then? Research director?
research director. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So they were the arbiters of quality. So he had to review that report.
Mm.
And he's like, "What do you do it?" I'm like, well, it's done. He's like, "Yeah, but it's like there's like a month left in the quarter. Like, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm just turning it in." He's like, "No, this is not how we operate." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "No, it's the night before the end of the quarter. That's when you turn it in." It was the concept of the golden dump truck, which at the end of the quarter, all the analysts would just dump all of these reports out, in the last moment. And Jerry's quote to him was, I think in comments, and the doc was like, "Don't teach him your bad habits."
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was an interesting time. I learned a lot.
I mean,
Yeah, there was a certain number of analysts that, yeah, to Ian's point, would just pull an all-nighter and drop the report on the last day, that it was required. And some of them, not present company, personally excluded, some of them would be incredibly lucid in their just stream of consciousness that they typed out, and it was amazing. But for us mere mortals, that was a
Others were
very
just
difficult
streams of
task.
something else.
Yes. But Ian, you said earlier, you said a couple of things that caught my ear here. One was that you typically would not go to a new job where you were working with strangers. So that tells me, relationships that you build over time, especially early in your career, is super important, right? I've always thought that you should strive to get to a point where you don't have to circulate a CV or resume to get your next job. That it should be, coming from the people that you know already. So that's super important. When did you feel like you were to that stage or to that point?
I don't think I was really ever at that stage until much later in my so-called career. I would say it slightly differently, which is, yeah, that is an amazingly fortunate place to be, right? If you were at that state, and that happened at Salesforce. Essentially, HR called me, was like, "Apparently we're hiring you. Can you send us a resume?" Was sort of it was an interesting reversed process. But that took a long time to get to, right? More, it was about people that were willing to come and tell you about stuff that was going on, like, "Hey, this is happening," or "You should meet these other folks," or what have you. And, at the time, this is when blogging in the identity space was a really big deal. It was the birth of blogging in a lot of ways, like those eras when like blogger.com was around. And so there were these people that you would read, Pat Patterson, for example, and Blakely and Kim Cameron and others. And I just started throwing my voice out there. And I think more than anything else, that and also a generous abuse of my liver was a way to get things out there. I mean, the real reason, the actual reason why I'm an analyst is because at Catalyst, back in the day when I was in San Francisco, in the O'Farrell Street Hilton, I had, for some reason, and I do not know how, in the middle of the day, gotten up the gumption to go talk to analysts, which was not my remit. And that was like at the time, like, oh my God, those are the people on stage. You have no reason to talk to them, and they have no reason to listen to you. But nonetheless, I think it was either Jerry or it was Nick Nichols or it was Mike Neuenschwander, one of those folks, all sort of legends in the industry. It's like, hey, there's this speakeasy thing up the street that I want to go check out tonight. Would you all be interested? They're like, yeah, well, that's a good idea. And so we go to this thing, and this is now in the Tenderloin. Now you're that one more block west on
Yes.
O'Farrell, which is like,
Yeah, about 200 feet from Iffy. Yep, gotcha.
yeah, you're like, oh, okay. And sure enough, speakeasy, it's amazing. It's, I think, still there. It's been a while. And hanging out in the library room that they had, I was like, hey Jerry, this is later in the evening. I'm like, I'd love to. I think it'd be a great idea for me to become an analyst at some point in time. And in my mind, he goes, yeah, it's a good idea. And that's how I became an analyst. Now I'm sure there's other steps involved, but that was the big one. Oh yeah, I had to write a writing sample, which I found and posted in recently, like a year or two ago, and someone was like, "This is utter crap." Like they just gave me the premise of it, which was pretty awesome.
Did you repost that? I missed that.
I did. I think I wrote a whole thing about using negative policies to describe like identity stuff. Like instead of saying like, here's the things you can't have, like why don't we enumerate, like why don't we describe conditions under which you can't have
exclusionary stuff? Okay. Yeah.
And an individual who is a absolute wonder in identity, Andre de Coot, in the Netherlands, was like, oh my God, this is horrible. Thank God you never did this. Like, so it's always good to get good nudges from the audience.
I mean, sometimes when we've asked about like career defining moments or things where the audience is thinking, oh, there was like this big moment, it was an incredible project and like this huge thing that got you to where you are. And here we're hearing speakeasy and having the gumption to get up and talk to analysts you thought were at a different level. And it turns out they were super approachable. And not only that, you got welcomed into the fold.
Yeah. And then it was all very blurry. And then we are flash forward. And Gartner has just acquired Burton Group, and we are in full prep for what was going to be the next Catalyst, which was ending up going to be like the second to last Catalyst, as it turns out. And Jerry and I were doing a talk, and at some point I'm like, Jerry, we've really got to work on these slides. He's like, no. I'm like, what? He's like, no, I don't want to do this talk. I'm like, oh, all right. Well, I mean, I can sub somebody. He's like, no, you're doing it solo. I'm out. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, and that's when he left Burton Group Gartner to go to Axiomatics, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think my tenure at Gartner was 5 weeks or so.
Yeah, you really got a lot of use of that email address, buddy.
That's right. That's right. All the corporate benefits along the way.
And the story continues.
And so actually both of you have had multiple experiences, both client side, vendor side, and analyst side. Is there any particular side of all those? That's a lot of sides I get. And you also have sat on a lot of boards and you've done a lot of working group and you've really helped shape the industry. Is there any one place that you really felt like you were like, it just felt the most natural, or has it all just been like, they all feel good and it's the experience you bring from one makes you better at another? Any thoughts on that? That was a weird question. You can say no.
I mean, nice, Jerry. So clearly I'm answering this first.
I know, I'm giving you that.
Oh, right there, kids.
You're the guest. You're the guest. Go
wow.
for it.
Look, no, insofar as, except for one exception, I have been extremely fortunate to be surrounded, even in cases when I didn't know a lot of people, by really, really quality folks. just on the general human level as well as in a professional sense. And because of that, it feels good. Like if you're doing good work with good people, it feels great. Even if you're doing things that is a bit of a slog with good fun people, like owning yet another connector for IBM Tivoli Identity Manager and trying to figure out why the hell it doesn't work with PeopleSoft empty version number because they decided to change something. Like that's a slog. But if you're surrounded by good people, it's a lot easier to get through it together and it becomes a lot more fun. And I've just been very fortunate in being able to string some of those things together and also take some of the best parts of those experiences and figure out how I can put them into practice as I keep rolling forward.
Well, I think Ian, also in your, as you get a little bit longer in years and get more of these experiences, I think
That was very
it's great.
tactful.
Yeah, I'm trying. Um, I think it's great to have the ability to share that with others. I think, as we're trying to record some of those anecdotes here of the the oral history, being able to share your experiences with others. It may not always be the right thing that you recommend or the right answer at the moment, but it's your experience and what you've gone through, and I think the folks coming up behind us should always appreciate that.
There is a sort of un not unexamined, but I don't think it's like less than amplified or could be amplified aspect of the actual humans in the history, in the sense that like you look at say a standard, and I'm going to take an arbitrary one here. Let's take service provisioning markup language, SPML, which was a bit of a lead balloon. But there was a lot of humans involved in it. And like there's reasons why there are things that are in there. And that's true of all standards. Like the human aspect of it, it's not faceless entities. It's
That's right. It's
not
not
just,
corporations doing this.
yeah, it is corporations that often are the sponsors of the work, and that's
Mhm.
incredibly important. But there's also equally just as passionate individual contributors out there. It's a harder road, but it's a very powerful and meaningful one. But there's humans in these processes, and it's not obvious from just reading an IETF draft like what went into it and why. And the thing that I was talking about this I think over at IdPro about not only just the why of why these standards happen, but like how would you actually use this thing? Like it is not obvious in many cases where you're like, yeah, I know exactly. It's a wrench. It's this shape. I know exactly what to do with it. In many cases, you look at this thing and go, I got no idea. Like, can someone explain to me what you would use this thing for? Then you're like, oh, okay, that's actually pretty cool. But man, there are some magical people in that industry in this standards world who can just look at something and be like, I know exactly what I'm going to do with this thing. Like, wow, that is not me. But it's the human part of it that's really, really interesting. I happened to be last week at Fido's Authenticate conference out in San Diego, and there's a bunch of folks that are around a lot of the FIDO related standards, but more generally. And there was a healthy amount of reminiscing about the humans involved in the process, because the world might see the IETF draft, they might see what OpenID Foundation produces. The rest of us hopefully get to see some of the process and learn from that, but also some of the humans involved and learn from them in the process.
I love this. I mean, as we think about Jerry, you were touching on networking and the value of that as well. I think that every superhero is actually underneath it all, and the coat and the costume and the cape is a human, and that's. I mean, I think what a lot lot of people need to remember is that like we see you on stage all the time, right? Both you guys actually,
I'm
but
sorry.
Ian,
I apologize.
especially.
I will get better at this. I promise.
I'm going to set
Soon
you
I'll
up.
learn how to put bullets on slides. It's coming. I swear.
I'm going to set you up for a fan club. You're going to have, but it does sound like approaching the speakers and just making yourself known, and just that networking is really critical in every point of the career, right? Not just starting out, but even maybe more so when you're starting out. You never know where it's going to
Yeah.
take you.
The unfortunate thing about the world we live in right now is that part of this, the most important things it feels like, are the human connections, the opportunities to make those. For a long time, and I think still today, a lot of those opportunities afford themselves at conferences. Those are pricey affairs. Those require travel approvals. Those require a lot of things that not everyone, especially when they're younger in their career, have the opportunity to get to. So this is why the work that we do at the Digital Identity Advancement Foundation is so important, was how do we get people to the places so that they can stand around the same coffee urns as some of these so-called legends and share a laugh at a mediocre conference, meal, and hear a great talk and get some feedback. And so to me, that's super important because there are real barriers to participation. And yes, it's easier now that you can get, time on a Zoom with someone, or at least the ability to get on a Zoom with someone. But that's real different than like what happens in conferences. And I leave aside all the shenanigans and all the fun, the actual stuff that happens in the rooms, the stuff that happens in the hallways. And that's incredibly hard to replicate outside of actually being physically there. And that's a challenge. That's a challenge we have to address.
Yes. So can you expand a little more on the foundation that you just mentioned, for folks that are not aware?
Yeah, so the Digital Identity Advancement Foundation was originally started, actually sort of incubated, if you will, inside of the Open ID Foundation. When Kim Cameron had passed away, he was so important to the industry, but he also did so much work inside of OIDF that they created a scholarship in his honor. It was essentially to get young people to conferences. And at the time, the executive director was saying, this is great, it's super important, but it's also not our mission, right? Open ID Foundation is about creating standards and performance testing and doing a lot of great work there. And they had approached myself and a few other people thinking, hey, maybe IdPro could take this over, or there's some other home for it that is more mission oriented. And after some thinking about it, myself, Alan Foster, and Aaron Crow decided the best thing to do was actually go create a new foundation for a purpose. So we have 2 awards inside of that. The award honoring Kim, again, getting young people to events. We've brought people from Bhutan, from Senegal, from Chile, all around the world to events. And then we created subsequently the Vittorio Bertocci Award, honoring our good friend, helping people participate in standards and technical standards work, because although they may be, and most likely are, a little bit on in their career, right? They've been doing this for a while. They may not work for an organization that's like, I'm willing to send you to wherever IETF has got the next meeting to advance your spec. Or be able to bring you to IIW, which is happening this week, at least as we're recording, and be able to socialize some of these concepts. Like that's a challenge, right? And especially now when standards are so important at actually a national security level, that we are investing in them and investing in people who want to take this job on and want to participate. So we feel very strongly about trying to find ways to get more people there. And so that's what DIAF works on.
You mentioned IdPro, and I know that had a founding seat in making that happen. And hopefully you have seen some other episodes. Every single member, we've done almost a dozen of these now. Every single identity hero that we've spoken with has said the very first thing that anybody should be paying attention to is IdPro, that they should join, they should be a member, they should participate. And it is a way to do this. Maybe, I don't want to say low cost, but low cost is perhaps the best way to describe it, right? It's an approachable way to stay involved with.
I would say it is, it affords individuals of all tenure an opportunity for a safe space to ask questions and get answers from people, sometimes in conflict with one another, but all reasoned out. People that have been doing this for a while, people that are just figuring it out. And it is incredibly valuable in that regard. So whether you're new to your career and identity or you're seasoned, doesn't matter. Everybody needs a safe space to look like a fool sometimes. And it's really, to me, like I absolutely and very genuinely often will ask questions in 90 Pro because I don't know the answers to some things. And I want to understand, like, hey, give me a use case for how RARs are actually used in practice, right? And get people with real practitioners, real experience talking about those things. Similarly, people saying like, how do you bludgeon Entra ID into doing this, right? Does anybody have like the right mallet that I'm supposed to select to make this happen? And everything in between. And
It's
then
really,
there
it's
are
really,
opportunities on top of that.
yeah, it's really an ask me anything kind of place. where you can just
It's ask everyone everything. It's
yes,
amazing
indeed.
in that regard. Kind of the best part about it is that there's a certain equalization about it in the sense that like no one is necessarily revered or treated any differently. So you're going to get the same kind of answer, whether you are brand new or whether you're Eve or George Fletcher or whomever, like people are going to answer because people want to give back and they recognize that. And it's something that I think everyone innately feels. Um,
And you
and
and
asking is part of it.
yeah, for sure. And Ian, you never know what thing is going to light stuff on fire.
Oh my
You know,
goodness.
there was a question out there recently. I forget exactly
Yeah.
what it was, but there were literally, I think, 250 replies to it.
The new tea back. Yes. It started. Yes.
Anyway, yeah. So yeah, you
Mike
put
Schwartz is
something out
always
there.
good for a spicy response that allows people to pile on. But you're
Well, that
absolutely right. Like there will be some things like I feel like there was a really interesting and deep rabbit hole around SAML that recently had opened up. And this is where you also get to see exposure to other parts of the industry you don't, right? And so the reason why I think about SAML and I think about that statement is as an analyst, I learned absolutely the most about identity from higher education and research customers. They have the hardest identity challenges that I have ever seen to this day, I have ever seen. And that the novelty at which they approach them using what from many people's perspectives would be a slightly outdated stack of technologies, but at the scale and at the absolutely complicated regulatory requirements that they have as well, it's amazing. So like that's why it's always interesting to watch people come from totally different industries answering a question where you're like, I never thought about why someone would do it like that. That's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, okay. So if I may, I'm going to do a little bit of a segue just to, in the interest of time, keep us a little bit on your hero's journey and arc here. And I want to get into a plot
Thoughts and
twist.
prayers. Okay, good
Okay.
luck.
Okay. Plot twist. I'm going to do my best. Thinking about plot twists, what didn't we see coming in 2024 that we're now facing in 2025, 26 going forward? And I almost don't want to answer it myself, but your thoughts. What didn't we see coming? What's the plot twist that we're encountering right now? That
I think the rapid calcification of traditional approaches to identity, the now ever increasing and accelerating awareness that we can't keep doing what we've been doing and expect different outcomes, and that the look we've been doing stuff the same way since Enron and SOX, right? It's coming up on 25 years. It's a generation's worth of years, and getting to that, wow, that's not going to carry us into the cloud era, let alone agentic, right? And that feels like a should have probably seen it coming, given the rapidity of innovation and the way adversaries are using that innovation, the way enterprises are demanding the use of that innovation. Yeah, I think that was the one that really caught me of like, things have to change and they have to change in a hurry and people are recognizing that. And now it's just becoming a compounding sort of thing. Like I feel like we'll really start to see this through next year, but the speed at which identity systems operate has got to dramatically increase. We're not going to access a sort of request and certify our way out of this hole. And that to me was something really special.
well, I think people were, you know, talking about that for a while, Ian. But we could tolerate it. You know, we could tolerate those legacy systems still. But up until now, I think now we've hit that breaking point where no, this just won't work anymore.
I will be curious to see how it manifests in the coming years. Is it going to be is AI sort of the tail that's wagging the dog or not? Because if we have an AI bubble, which is likely probably in some amount of one, what does that do? I don't think it changes the need for continuous identity. I don't think it changes the need for our identity infrastructure to respond more rapidly to changes in context.
but there's also this element of maybe taking what we've already learned and putting these proven principles against agentic? Is there a place of versus having to start fresh and just do something wholesale new? We probably are having to figure out how to steer.
I
The
mean,
old ways aren't
you
working.
know why we keep reinventing standards, right? Like, I think it was Eve. I'm going to attribute this to Eve. I could be wrong about this, which is the reason why we keep reinventing the wheels. Eventually, you get around one. Um, and this is true of standards. This is true of our approaches. Like, we keep iterating on these things, and we've gotten past these sort of octagonal shaped wheels to a mostly round shaped wheel, but not round enough, right? Not with the kind of tolerances we need to have that friction free experience, that timely experience to serve both agentic and consumer needs. So, yeah, like, we're going to keep iterating on these things, and some things are going to fall by the wayside, and a lot of things are going to have to get created too.
The speed and I think the velocity of the change is the thing that's like just unprecedented. It's like as a product marketer, I do a lot of competitive intelligence and market research, and it just seems like every Monday morning, it's not just like there's something new. It's like the entire thing has changed yet again. Like that's how quickly we're evolving right now.
I mean, case in point, between essentially like April 15th and June 1, and then June 1 to like July 15th, the amount of change in the MCP spec or so-called spec was dramatic from an identity perspective, and it changed yet again. And so woe be you if you're an enterprise architect to be like, no, 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 this is my architecture. Oh, damn it. Hold on. No, no, this is my, will you guys stop this? Like, I have to write boxes and arrows down. Stop it. But the reality is it's not going to stop. And so now it's about what are building blocks? What are, essentially principles of design, and what are basic tenets we can cling to. And I think that's true with and without identity as well.
Well, one thing I'll say, Ian, is that what I see as the collective brain power in the industry that's focused on, what is the right MCP approach and architecture and set of standards and so on. The amount of focus of that brain power is like nothing I've seen before. It seems like there are so many eyeballs and brain cells working on that right now, that with an intensity that you don't normally see. Does that sound right?
I think there's something to that for sure. And I think the interesting thing about it is the identity is very much at the core of a lot of these conversations, even in its absence. And so if you haven't seen it, go and watch Nat Sakamura's latest talk, because he's saying, look, this is the year verified credentials really become a thing. And the reason why is because AI, and he's actually then looking at AP2, which is essentially an e-commerce AI standard, saying, look, it's codifying these kinds of identity concepts like intent and consent and these things in VCs. And I'm looking at this going, oh man, that is a real novel application of something that we've got to go solve, or to be able to solve something we need to do, long needed to do, around delegation on behalf of a variety of things like that. And, of course it's going to be Nat who's going to figure that out and make it understandable to everyone. But like, yeah, a lot of really interesting, not only innovation happening, but innovation happening that is so close to what we do or what we need to be doing, versus we've been so obsessed with plumbing. Identity's been real good about plumbing. We spent the last 25 years working on plumbing, and it's good enough in a lot of ways. Okay, now what are we going to build? Great Pam Dingle quote of, we haven't really solved a lot in identity, but we've now built all the tools we need. And now we can go solve something. And that was a few years ago. And I think she was right and will continue to be right.
Interesting. I like that. Well, you mentioned, as we're thinking about the MCP spec, I think things have changed, and it's like things about agentic workflows that are either identity based, or it's like the noted lack of identity. If I were to ask you, when you were doing work, both client and vendor side, as you're thinking really on vendor side, like how do you communicate the value of identity within the organization? Like we ask our heroes to say, how do you get other parts of the organization to realize the importance and value? Do you think it's amplified even more so now? And what advice might you give about that?
I absolutely love that when you ask a hard question, Mark, Jerry goes straight for the coffee cups.
Right.
There's no gray area about who's going to answer this damn question.
That's the co-host move.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. I think that it is easier to tell the value of identity story now than it was possibly ever, in that it is no longer an esoteric thing. Because when someone's like, okay, I'm going to need to know, in case this agent goes wonky, who is it acting on behalf of? That's an identity problem. When I think about customer experience and getting them a personalized experience that is both high enough assurance for our regulatory requirements, but also sort of slick and shiny enough for an Apple and Google sort of UX, if you will, that becomes an identity problem at some point in time, right? Because you have to balance, the identity practitioner, have to balance those needs of assurance with needs of customization and personalization with consent. Like, you're the nexus of those things. And that to me is really powerful. And we have had, again, still, and continue will have, breaches that have strong identity implications, right? And it's not just anymore, oh, they should have turned on MFA, right? That's a given. It's that plus, maybe leaving standing access to critical cloud infrastructure is maybe not the best idea sprinkled around the organization. That's how it got abused. Someone went lateral on this. That becomes a very interesting business resiliency conversation. It's not about an identity conversation. We just happen to hold the controls here. And that's powerful, right? As practitioners get more seasoned and think about framing identity in terms of business resiliency, enterprise risk mitigation, and customer experience, those become super fun, energizing conversations, board level conversations. And to me, that has been a very satisfying thing to see happen, is the transformation of sort of identity as, oh, that's just the team that fields the password reset questions, to the people that actually have an active hand to play in what our business resiliency strategy is. That's a powerful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Identity systems have become one of the key control planes within an organization. It's sort of standalone or above or aside from security, writ large. And who has not received some notification in the mail? Oh, here's your free 1-year identity theft, monitoring because you've been victim of an identity breach somewhere. I mean, so the awareness is certainly out there like it never has been before.
Well, I mean, so I had the benefit of, Jerry, working with and alongside you for many years. And I'm going to shift gears to one of mentorship. Ian, you talked about surrounding yourself with the smartest people you can find. And I got lucky enough, I found Jerry, so I got to learn quite a bit from him along the way. Mentorship, when I see you post on IdPro and ask a question, I'm like, Ian's account must have gotten hacked. He can't be asking a question. He knows everything, but you admittedly don't. And that's awesome. Where do you look for mentorship, or how would you recommend the folks watching think about seeking out the smartest people that they can surround themselves with?
So, a couple of things. One, if you're newer in your career in this industry, finding local meetups, joining IdPro, great things you can do. Track the Identibeer gang, because
Yes.
there's one now in every
Or start one.
Or start one. Reach out to Espen Bago, and he will help you. That has been an amazing grassroots thing. So first and foremost, it's about human connection. And before you get to even a state of asking around mentorship, because from human connection comes, hey, can I ask you a question? Comes, hey, you want to grab lunch sometime? Then it becomes a lasting relationship. I've been very fortunate enough to build friendships for a lifetime through this industry. And that wasn't necessarily sort of mentorship seeking. That was simply, hey, we're all traveling on this crazy schedule and we're all drinking the same crappy conference coffee, and it becomes a bonding sort of thing. Local meetups have that same opportunity. I think that's very powerful. I think if you've been doing this a while, it is incumbent on you to make it easier for the people that are doing it now, because it took a long time to learn how to do identity for you if you've been more seasoned. And this is absolutely incumbent, because what? I'm not a sadist. I don't want it to be as hard for other people as it was for us. That's just ridiculous. I always have this image of we built this great tree house and then pulled the ladder up and be like, nope, we don't need any more practitioners. Utter total lie. Like we need 10 times more practitioners in this space. So giving back could be very small, right? It's simply like within the organization. Is there weekly tech talks you can give about what identity means and what you're doing with it?
I
Or,
love that.
inside your organization,
Yeah.
do you have juniors that are coming up and that you can help out, that you can say like, you know what? I don't need to go to this conference. I'm not speaking at it. Why don't you go instead? Like you can take my slot. Like that means a lot. That means an awful lot. And then lastly, like don't think you don't have a voice in this, right? It's not like there's some chosen group of people that get to dictate all these things. These are just people. And yeah, there's some loud voices. Some of them actually like have good things to say, depending on the day, but that can be you too, right? There's no sort of pre-selection about this. Identity is a welcoming world, and it is incumbent on us to continue to make it so. And it is incumbent upon us to continue to remove barriers of participation so that more people can join and learn the same things we have.
Yeah, and I think it's been our experience that, the identity community is, I don't know if there's another industry or a segment of an industry that's more welcoming or more collegial than this one. I mean, yeah, we have our debates, and even arguments, but it's like everyone is welcome. Absolutely. 100%.
Ian, this was awesome. I really appreciate that you taking the time. I think we have an idea for another conversation to have about some of that esoteric history of identity that we'll maybe tease out a little bit later as well. But if I were to ask one last thing, and just thinking forward about the other folks who have really made some interesting impacts on the industry, who might you recommend that we connect with next as we're thinking about the Identity Hero series? Who would make another story? Maybe someone who isn't as high profile that we don't see on stage all the time. Is there anyone that jumps out?
Let's see. First off, Sakamura, Pam Dingle, if you haven't already got those folks lined up, like, I don't know what you're doing. Like, why are you wasting time with me? Less known, talk to people like Aaron Crow, who is just absolutely a superstar, now running identity over at MongoDB, or Elizabeth Garber, who's been helping out DIAF and OpenID Foundation, and obviously Heather Flanagan, who's the unseen hand throughout all of identity.
Oh, we got her. It was a great
Awesome,
talk.
awesome.
Yes.
So like those are some. They'll give you more.
Awesome. We will do that. Well, Jerry, any last questions for Ian?
No, I feel like we've just touched the surface though.
I know. I feel so badly, but in the
I mean,
same
there's
breath.
so many things we did talk about, like why working group analysts can't go to T1, and pictures of cats in presentations. Which, if you were lucky enough to be at FIDO last week, you got to see Pam Dingle give an absolutely crushing keynote that also had internet cat memes involved. So she's given the masterclass. So just give up if you're trying to get a keynote out there. She's the best.
Yeah, gotcha.
Like there's a lot. There's a lot of ground there.
All
Outstanding.
right.
Another day.
Outstanding. Well, thanks, Ian, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Guys.
This was awesome. And Jerry, thank you for, as always, and to our audience, thank you for joining us and spending the time. Ian, this is great. It gives us a chance to share your story. You are so human, so approachable. I think a lot of folks would be maybe intimidated. They shouldn't be. They should know that you're just like everyone else and don't know all the things, but are learning all the time. And so thank you for spending time with us. Hope to see you on the next episode, and we'll see you soon. Take care.